Time Conversations. I'm your host, Justin Farmer, inviting you to be in community with us about conversations and ideas that matter. Today, our guests are Myron Melnick and Carl Harvey, here to talk to us about uh, the the remind me the proper name of the organization again, the Ukrainian.
New Haven, Connecticut, Ukrainian American Humanitarian Aid Fund. We are an incorporated organization.
Yeah, I always shorthand and I'm like the Ukrainian Aid Fund, and I'm just like, nope, I gotta get it all in there. Thank you, gentlemen, for being in community. Um, you know, so how how did this aid fund start, and how did y'all get involved?
Well, the aid fund actually began actually in 1920 in 2022.
Mhm.
Prior to that, we were providing humanitarian aid through other means, such as federal legislation, and working with our senators and congressmen. And Myron can fill you in some more on that aspect of it.
Yeah.
Yes, prior to the start of the war in 2022, we were working with Senator Blumenthal, Representative Courtney, Representative Rosa DeLauro, our local congresswoman, to provide aid to Ukraine. Because as you know, the war really started in 2014 when the Russians annexed Crimea. And then shortly thereafter, in the southeast part of Ukraine, war broke out. Russian military occupied those territories, and that was really the beginnings of the war. It was localized to the southeast region until 2022 when Russia launched its full-scale invasion. And with our congressional representatives, we worked on getting legislation to help wounded Ukrainian soldiers,
Mhm.
um, especially working with the Senate and the House Armed Services Committees on the National Defense Authorization Act. That's a law that's passed every year to fund the Pentagon
Mhm.
and all the activities of the Pentagon around the world. So there are paragraphs in that legislation to the countries that the U.S. is involved with. So in the past, it was, Afghanistan, and even prior to that, it was, Iraq. But with the outbreak of the war in 2014, it became Ukraine, and there was a paragraph called the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative. And we worked with our congressional representatives to have wording in that massive legislation to specifically help wounded soldiers in Ukraine who couldn't be treated in Ukraine because they didn't have the technology or the knowledge. So soldiers were actually brought here to the United States,
Mhm.
primarily Walter Reed Hospital in Washington, and they were treated there for their conditions, for their various injuries, and then they went back to Ukraine. So that was a program which is still operational. There's
Mhm.
a soldier now at Walter Reed from Ukraine who's being treated. So we're very appreciative to our congressional representatives for making that happen and continuing to support that.
Yeah, the the efforts, right, that happen to make uh, these efforts and legislation happen are uh, are a Herculean effort, right? Like it takes a lot of energy and a lot of people to make it happen. But what are the personal stakes for y'all that brought you to this issue around Ukraine in specific?
Well, Carl will speak for himself, but we're both very active in the local Ukrainian American community. My parents, who were both deceased, came from Ukraine
Mm.
after World War II, and I grew up here and went to school here, and obviously still here. And so I have a personal connection through my parents and also through some relatives that are still in Ukraine, in southwestern area of Ukraine near the Romanian border.
Mm.
So I have cousins there and second cousins there and an uncle, and so we do communicate and stay in touch. So I have a personal connection through my Ukrainian roots, I would say.
Mm.
Unlike him, I'm through and through American. I was born here in New Haven, Connecticut.
Hey.
I married into the culture in 1964. And after that, in 1991, a group of us who were veterans or former active duty and so forth came out of church one day, and one of the people who was a member of another Ukrainian organization said, "What would you think about organizing a Ukrainian American Veterans Post here in New Haven?" Oh, we all said, "Sound like a good idea." Well, who's going to be commanding officer? You, pointing to me. So we're from Ukrainian American Veterans Post, Bishop John Stock Post 33. And from this humanitarian aid program that we're working on now is in partnership with St. Michael's Ukrainian Catholic Church and also the Knights of Columbus Council that's affiliated with the church. So it's in order to provide greater outreach to hopefully get more people involved and contributing to the program and to the humanitarian aid.
One of the things that comes to mind, the communal sacrifice that's made, right, from people, right, who serve, right, whether that be the armed services or in other ways. And so, what has been the, once the invasion happened, what was the response of your families about engaging in this work, right? And did it, being veterans yourselves, was it hard to see, for you, your community, right, and the community that you were connected to, was it hard to grapple with that and figure out how to be supportive?
Well, for me, in the beginning, my wife had passed away in 2013.
Sorry.
And shortly after that, I had to have some help, and some very close friends of mine brought a lady by the name of Nadia Ivansev over to help help me out. And it was the trip that we took in 2016 that actually got all of this humanitarian aid part of the program started. So if it weren't for her coming to work for me, there wouldn't have been a program, probably.
And continuing with what Carl said, in 2018, our veterans organization was invited to a veterans forum in Ukraine. Talk about the VA, to talk about how veterans are supported, how they're treated in the United States. And so we participated in that forum in Kyiv, in the capital. And then we had an opportunity to travel around the country and visit certain hospitals, military hospitals. So we saw already at that time, this was before the full-scale Russian invasion, we saw wounded soldiers already being treated from the war going on in southeastern Ukraine. So things became, very personal, and we developed, relationships with these different places and with some of the people who were volunteering to help these soldiers. So it's kind of a continuum actually from 2014 on, but it became as Carl mentioned, became very personal once we traveled there.
You know, so what does the fund do? Like what are the issues that y'all work on, and how has that changed and evolved over time?
Our primary mission from the beginning was to raise funds, which would enable us to then collect, at that time, anything and everything that the general community all over the state of Connecticut and as far away as even Texas. We used to get stuff shipped to us to then send over. There is cost with that. So what we had to do is we would send what we had collected down to our shipping company, Dnipro in New Jersey, and they would pack it in a container, send it over to Ukraine, and so forth. So we had to, we had to have the money in order to be able to support the shipping of the stuff to it. More recently, when Father Roman Manulaco, I mentioned previously, was wanted to be able to purchase things over there, which were being requested. All of the stuff that gets sent over is by request from Father Roman, which he gets from the rest of the people throughout all of Ukraine. So he organized this Heart of the Samaritan Fund so that we could transfer money directly from our Humanitarian Aid Fund over to his Heart of the Samaritan Fund, so that he could then go out and purchase, these things that had been requested. So
Carl brings up a very important point. Our fund is a nonprofit.
Yeah.
All volunteers, nobody gets paid. In Ukraine, Father Roman's Heart of the Good Samaritan is a registered fund, nonprofit, no paid workers. So 100% of the aid gets distributed to the people that need it. And we have been shipping for a long time, ever since the start of the war. To date, we've shipped 14 containers. Each one of these is 40 feet long and 10 foot high. So these are big containers of medical supplies, of humanitarian aid, of equipment that they need. In addition to that, we've shipped vehicles, SUVs, because you have to distribute and drive this stuff to where it needs to be delivered. So, it's been a full-scale effort. The estimate that Carl came up with for all of our aid is about $9 million worth of humanitarian aid.
Plus, add to that about another $15,000 we've given to Father Roman to be able to purchase the medicines and other stuff that he's.
Wow, that is an amazing effort. Myron, we met at Southern over Yulia's exhibit, right, about the children of Ukraine drawing depictions of war. And so, I know y'all have this art show coming up. And so, what is this art show? How did it get started? How, and what brought you to Southern, right, for us to cross paths?
Well, two different questions. Let's talk about Southern first. This art show at Southern is an exhibit of paintings and drawings by young children, their impressions of the war, their depiction of the horrors, their fears, their concerns about the future. And so it's kind of a emotional expression of reaction to war through the eyes of children. So that exhibit was from about 9-year-old kids up until about 13 or 14-year-old kids. I went through, and that was the age group that was involved. It's a very sensitive subject, war, and the impressions that kids have. Kids have been abducted. There are 20,000 kids that have been forcefully resettled into Russia, adopted, dispersed. We know where some of them are, some of them we don't know where they are. There's a full-scale effort to find them and to bring them back. There's a couple of organizations. And here at Yale, there's a effort called the Yale Human Research Lab, which is headed up by Nate Raymond. He's at the Yale School of Public Health, and he has been working on tracking the whereabouts of these kids and documenting their whereabouts. And that information has been distributed really throughout the world. He has traveled to Europe. He's presented these cases at The Hague, the International Criminal Court, and his work is ongoing. And so, you know, tracking the impressions of children and their whereabouts is very important. It's a very emotional, difficult subject to work with. So this art show is the impression of children. Okay? Our art show, the one that's coming up on next weekend, the 25th and the 26th of October, is works of art by wounded soldiers. We talked earlier about visiting different hospitals when we were in Ukraine in 2018. One of the hospitals we visited was in Zhytomyr, and that's 50 miles due west of Kyiv, big military hospital. We visited that facility, and in that hospital they have different programs, and there's a group of soldiers who have severe mental trauma, PTSD, traumatic brain injury. And to treat these soldiers, they're using art therapy. So they're teaching them to draw and to express themselves and to occupy their time. So these works of art have been brought over here to the U.S. We imported them. We had to get them through all the authorities in Ukraine, get them over the border, and we have them. They'll be on display and for sale. So this is the perspective of adults, not children anymore, and it's wounded soldiers who are being treated for their mental health conditions.
Yeah, before we started, we were talking about, how often when we talk about war, we talk about property value and land, and but there's individuals, there's people, right? And so in this time, in this moment now, right, y'all are continuing your efforts to raise money to support people and communities and families. How does the political climate feel to you, and what's the hope you would want to share with community members and leaders, right, about the need for these efforts?
Well, we don't get involved with the politics of the situation. People need help. They need aid. We're able to provide it. So we rise above the political, environment. Sometimes it's very contentious, but it's human to human endeavor, and people need help, and we try to provide it. It's a humanitarian cause. It's a moral cause. So while we follow events closely in Ukraine, and even the attitude of the current administration, I understand that Secretary of War Pete Hegseth is speaking today, or has spoken today, addressing NATO, saying that Ukraine is going to get some heavy-duty armaments, which is definitely a step forward. And armaments are important. We would all like to be able to settle disputes diplomatically, and not have to resort to war and violence. But the reality is, you have to defend yourself. And in the end, when you're being attacked, you don't go back to your theories of negotiation and communication to try to resolve the conflict. You have to defend yourself first and foremost. Defend your territory, defend your land, defend your people.
And there's also the issue of what is President Putin's ultimate goal, and that is for him to basically obliterate the whole Ukrainian culture, overrun Ukraine, destroy all of the institutions and so forth. And if he accomplishes that, then it'll be continuing to move on into the Balkans and into Germany and as far west as he can possibly go. He wants to rebuild the Soviet Union.
Yeah, it's a painful question. Like, why does Putin bomb civilians? Why does he bomb cities? These are not soldiers. This is not the military that he's attacking. He is deliberately destroying cities, people, schools, churches, and
hospitals.
And it's just a painful question. Why would anybody resort to this kind of violence on innocent people?
Yeah, there's conflicts all over the globe right now, right? And there are some folks who have an isolationist point of view where it's like those are those other people's problems, right? That has nothing to do with me. Those issues can stay over there. I can stay over here. Or people who worry about the national debt and say, well, we can't afford to get involved. What would y'all say to those individuals?
There is one question that frequently arises when you speak to various people throughout the country, and that is, what is happening to all of this money that the United States is sending over to Ukraine? The fact of the matter is, only a small amount of the total amount that's being supposedly sent over is actually going to pay companies in the United States to produce the weapons and so forth which Ukraine needs. So it's actually benefiting from our economy here in the United States, and it's very little of that money is now going into Ukraine. So, and it's a moral question, really. We're all human beings. We're all brothers and sisters.
Hey.
So let's treat each other in the same way.
Yeah, that's an important point that Carl made. It's not cash that's being sent to Ukraine. It's American companies that are producing weapons, ammunition, and it's that's being sent to Ukraine. So it's actually American companies that are benefiting from this, and it's not money going into Ukrainian politicians' pockets. Okay, so that's been a misconception. But you can't be, in the end, you can't be an isolationist forever. Like if you're in the city of New Haven and you see violence around you and you don't speak out, you don't support the police, you don't support policies to reduce that violence, in the end, you're going to be threatened. And what are you going to do? Barricade yourself in a house with guns and just wait for somebody to cross your threshold and blast that person or individual or group away? So in the end, you can't be isolationist in the end. You have to engage with the world around you. And as Carl mentioned, these are humans. They're innocent people, the people who are being bombed. There are other conflicts in the world, but there is no place where cities are being targeted and individual civilians are deliberately being bombarded every day. So that's a big difference in the way the conflict is being conducted by the Russians.
Yeah, for those of y'all who are just joining us, you're listening to Just in Time Conversations, WNHHFM 103.5. You know, you know, war is a terrible thing, right? Um, there are atrocities being committed by many different governments against peoples. Um, I think you hit the nail on the head that, you know, people have to think outside of themselves. And so, what's the resolution? What's the thing that helps get the Ukrainian community back to normality, right? We hopefully will see what happens with this, uh, uh, peace treaty in Gaza right now and how that unfolds and what that looks like. But what does that look like, in your minds, y'all's perspective, for the Ukrainian people, right? I've heard some people say, well, let Putin annex this part or that part, and call it a day, right? Or, you know, um, go back to the original borders, or, like what does that look like for y'all? Or what case would you lay out for listeners to, like, what we should be aspiring for our neighbors in Ukraine?
So the first thing you need is a ceasefire.
Mm.
Because you can't conduct diplomacy, you can't move forward unless there's a pause in the fighting. Now, Putin doesn't want to do that, so he has to be forced to do it. The current strategy is to starve his economy by stopping oil revenues from funding Russia's war. That's the current strategy. Secretary Hegseth has now ratcheted up potentially the support of Ukraine with longer range weapons to bring the war to Russia, and not to attack civilians the way the Russians are doing, but to attack Russian oil depots and refineries, and again starve the Russian economy of the money to keep this war going. So that is all planned for getting a ceasefire. Will that happen? How long it'll take to happen? I feel it eventually would happen. A combination of economic pressure and then destroying Russian oil infrastructure. Not civilians, not attacking cities like the Russians are doing, but attacking the infrastructure. Once you have a ceasefire, then you talk about borders. Now, it should be mentioned that Russia committed to observing the borders in 1991 under President Yeltsin, and then again in 1994 when Ukraine gave up its nuclear arms voluntarily. Russia signed an agreement along with the U.S. and Britain, and then France joined in. 1994 is called the Budapest Memorandum, and the Russians again recognized the borders of Ukraine as being inviolable, internationally recognized and observed. So Russia is in direct violation of their commitments. Okay? And will there be a restoration of borders immediately? Probably not. But then we have to remember a couple of interesting cases which historically are important. In 1940, the Soviet Union invaded Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. and made those Soviet republics. And from 1940 to 1990, those republics were Soviet republics under Russian control, under Moscow control. When the Soviet Union fell apart, these countries were the first to declare their independence. Another case, after World War II, the communists occupied East Germany, and we know there was a demarcation line between East and West Germany. And the East Germans were part of the Russian sphere of influence, the Soviet sphere of influence. And again, that unraveled when the Soviet Union fell apart. And now we have Eastern and Western Germany united, and it's one Federal Republic of Germany. So the restoration of borders will likely be a longer term problem. That's the realistic approach that I think we can see.
And I was talking to Yulia about this, who held the exhibit at Southern, and race culture is such it's a simplistic thing and a complicated thing, right? Where people immigrate to different places, right? People have different connections to places, right? And then culture, the things that make our identity. There's things that people share. There's things that people don't. And I think one of the things I have grappled with Russia invading Ukraine is this weird dynamic that you have all these different subcultures in this country called Russia, right? From historical periods, different times, right? And as recent, right, as, the fall of the Soviet Union. And so it's interesting because you have people who, maybe 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more, but if you ask them, what are you? They might just say Russian, right? And it might be more nuanced than that, but they would say in simplicity, oh, I'm Russian, or oh, I'm this, right? And so how do we respect culture and diversity in times of conflict, right? Because I think it is something, right? We're grappling with these issues here in the U.S. about how the changing of demographics and people, and how do we, orient ourselves with those differences. But how do y'all grapple with that, and how are you teaching the next generation, to preserve culture and have pride in their culture, and be able to engage with other people about repair, right? Because there's always going to be disconnections for whatever reasons, but how do y'all engage with that?
Let's talk about culture for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
We have to bring up some facts.
Mm.
And in 1991, when Ukraine aspired to be independent, they had a national referendum.
Yeah.
And 91% of the population throughout Ukraine, including Crimea, including eastern part of Ukraine where the conflict is now, 91% of the population voted for independence.
Mm.
So independence doesn't mean that you're going to violate somebody's cultural rights. In fact, Putin has been talking a lot about how Russian speakers are discriminated against and how they can't, have their schools. Not true. On the front lines today, you have Russian-speaking Ukrainians and you have Ukrainian-speaking Ukrainians. There's actually an international legion of soldiers from all around the world, including the United States, that's fighting on the side of Ukraine. So Putin's philosophy, or his propaganda about this is a cultural war, and that this war has to purify the Ukrainian population, and we're all Russians in the end. This is a red herring.
Mm.
This is a distraction from the truth. He uses it to mobilize his population, his military, and this is the lie that he speaks every day,
Mm.
that he's defending Russian culture. But it's not Russian culture that he wants. He wants Ukrainian territory, and he
Mm.
wants Ukraine to be part of Russia, the way Carl is explaining it.
Yeah.
You get a good feel of the dynamics that's going on. There's an online journal which I check out every morning, which I kind of use as my daily intelligence briefing,
Hey.
and that is Kiev Independent.
Mm.
It's like an online newspaper. Each paragraph summarizes another larger article, and within of each of those paragraphs there'll be a word or a phrase that'll be in blue. If you click on that, it opens up the whole article, so you can see. And a lot of the articles have pictures, so that people can actually see how bad things really are there. So I would encourage anyone who is interested in finding out what it's really like should go to that site. Again, it's Kyiv Independent, KYIV Independent.
Yeah, no, I appreciate y'all's responses. What gives you hope? Right? What gives you hope? What energizes you to continue the work, and what what's something about Ukrainian culture that you want people to participate and engage with and understand?
From my experience working with Father Roman and members of his family there, and with people that are in the medical facilities that are, directors, doctors, and so forth, they are very strong people.
Mm.
They're very proud people in terms of wanting to defend their country, and they will do whatever it takes to defend the country and to win the war. So that's the basic tenet behind it.
Mm.
Yeah, the arc of justice bends very slowly, but it does bend towards justice. And Ukrainian people, just like people around the world, deserve justice, deserve their rights, deserve their freedoms.
Mm.
And in the end, that's something that everybody should support.
Yeah, no. As we come towards the end of our time, where is this art exhibit? Right, the 2 days. Where is it located? The time? How do people engage and support? And if for whatever reason somehow people miss it, I don't know why they would, right? But how do they continue to support the efforts y'all are?
Well, to find out more about it, we have a Facebook page,
Mm.
New Haven, Connecticut, Ukrainian American Humanitarian Aid Fund. If you Google that, you'll get to our Facebook page. You'll see examples of some of the artwork and some videos of the soldiers, etc. New Haven, Connecticut, Ukrainian American Humanitarian Aid Fund. The weekend after this weekend, the 25th and the 26th, we have a two-part art show. The first part is Saturday night. It's at our renovated church hall on George Street, a block away from St. Raphael's Hospital, 569 George Street. Free parking across the street. On Saturday night, there's a VIP preview for donors who have contributed $100 or more. On Sunday is really the main event from noon till 6 p.m. That's when all these artworks will be exhibited and available for sale. There's a cultural program that we're going to have. It's not going to be a concert, but there'll be some entertainment. There'll be some hors d'oeuvres and some refreshments. So we invite people to come and support us, support these soldiers. All of the proceeds are going to these soldiers who are being treated in this hospital in central Ukraine, Zhytomyr, just west of Kyiv. So this is a fundraiser, and we invite people to come and observe and appreciate some of the art and buy some of it and support this cause.
The way that people can make contributions, even if they're not able to, attend the event, we do have on our Facebook page. There are some QR codes which they would be able to make a donation through to our account, or they could also mail a check to the shut that off for me, please. To the NHCT UAHA Fund Incorporated, mailed to 569 George Street in New Haven, Connecticut, and the zip code is 06511. And or they can come to do the viewing and so forth on either Saturday or Sunday night. Look forward to seeing you all there.
Yeah, last question, there's been an outpour of support from, the greater New Haven community. And, what has that felt like to be in a community, and extend that beyond, right? The town lines, right?
We're very appreciative of the support that we have, and from the beginning. Most of the members of our volunteer fund are non-Ukrainian, different backgrounds, different nationalities. From the outset of the war, people have supported us, not only our legislators, but individuals. We've had support from Yale New Haven Hospital, from other hospitals who've donated supplies. People have brought in equipment, medical equipment. We have relationship with different organizations that bring stuff in periodically, and then we inventory it, value it, and pack it into containers and ship it to Ukraine. So we're very appreciative of the support that the broader community has given our fund and Ukraine in general. Yes.
And it's not just from Connecticut. We also received some of the medical equipment from New Hampshire. We received donations from as far away as Texas and Florida. And one of our other posts, Ukrainian American Veterans Post, has been a strong supporter of us. And that's Post 43 up in Johnson City, New York. So it's coming in from all over the country. So we're very appreciative of all that comes in.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Hopefully, right, we'll have lots of support. Let us continue to plant the seeds of change so that we can grow together.
And we look forward to seeing you there, Justin, Sunday.
Yeah, I will.
Sign on the dotted line, Justin. That's how we operate.